You know, everybody in gardening talks about mulch, but not enough of us are doing it. We're here today at Cal Poly Pomona at the Center for Regenerative Studies to meet Dr. Bill Roley. Dr. Roley is an expert in urban ecology and knows an awful lot about mulch. Let's go meet Dr. Roley and see what we can find out about mulch and how to use it in our gardens. How are you doing? Just fine, thanks.
Great.
Nice to meet you.
I'm just out here mulching on my garden right now.
That's great. You know, what exactly is mulch?
Well, mulch can be almost anything that is organic. Weeds, grass, straw, paper, anything that'll decompose that's sort of the treasure chest of nature's regenerative system. We can lay it on the ground and basically it'll break down because you hire the microorganisms to work for you, sort of micropower, an environmental energy system. And we then create these scapes that you'll see all around us as we walk around at the center that are taking the material that you usually throw in your landfill, 30 to 60% of most of the urban waste stream that we dump into a hole and forget, we're now going to mine and put on the surface and let the microbes work with us.
So there's lots of different kinds of mulch.
Anything that's organic. The idea is if it's organic, don't panic and allow yourself to be able to use it on the landscape. So you should pretty much, if you're in a home gardening situation, keep most of the organic material around your house either in a composter or in a mulching system like we have here. This is a garden bed that's laid out for the students to use in a planting area. And what we do is if you open the mulch up here, you'll see the rich granular surface. It's still really moist. And look at notice the granularness of the structure. It basically is compost that's been broken down over time and creating soil structure, aeration, and all the kinds of things that it's embodied solar energy in a sense by putting it on the landscape. You want to make sure that you leave it on the surface and not put it in the ground because it'll rob nitrogen. So if you're going to add this kind of carbon-based material, you want to add nitrogen to it too so that you can break it down. But there's lots of mulches.
Dr. Roley, what exactly is this mulch here composed of?
It's interesting. We're not really choosy because we need as much as we can. It turns out that you can put this on every 3 months to 6 months, 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, and it distributes itself back into the system very easily. This is ground tree trimmings. This is eucalyptus that most people think is a real terrible situation.
Yeah, no, I'd heard that before, that you can't use eucalyptus as mulch.
If you use eucalyptus as a mulch, it's very beneficial. As a compost, once it breaks down, it's probably one of the best that there is. We've run tests on that.
So how do you differentiate compost from mulch?
Well, compost is a biologically degraded and decomposed material that what I call the FBI. The fungus, the bacteria, and the insects all raid it, eat it, use it for their food source. In a sense, we're creating habitat. This is habitat and food for the humosphere. Right under our fingers here, we have more biological material living than anything above our feet.
You know, I think a lot of people don't realize that soil is alive.
Well, that's the key issue. I mean, farmers should manage bugs. Bugs produce our food. And this is the key system at the Center for Regenerative Studies, and when we go to other places in our permaculture network, we will be able to see that managing the microorganisms. If you look at a pyramid for the food groups, we're at the top. We're the omnivores. There's carnivores, there's herbivores, and then below that there's the decomposers. That's the largest section of the food group, the most underutilized. If you think about it, when we were in our sort of infancy in the colonial times, the Vasco da Gamas and the Columbuses were the aquanauts, and they sailed off across the flat world and tried to discover a new frontier. Then we decided that we wanted to go into the sky, and we were astronauts, and decided that the solar system was our next venue. And I introduced myself as a future anthropologist, saying the humosphere, or the humusnauts, is the next real realm, because more biological activity is going on under the soil, under our feet, than any other place. It's the treasure chest of regeneration.
So, Bill, what you're saying to me is really any organic matter can be mulch. You don't have to pile it up, you don't have to compost it, you don't have to put it in a special bin, turn it, do anything. You can just use the organic matter on the top of the soil.
This is a well-known secret, John, that if you can see the well-knownness, nature's been doing it for millions of years. Every forest has all the litter coming down that creates
underneath.
The duff that creates topsoil. If it gets pushed under the earth into large caverns, we create oil. If you add pressure to it, we create diamonds. So we have diamonds, oil, or we have what nature drives the forest with. This is embodied solar energy, and most people, this is a diamond in the rough, if you will.
And to a gardener, this is almost worth as much as diamonds, right?
That's true. It's for any organic farmer or gardener, we can't get enough of it. I usually talk about getting bit by the compost bug, that you're always looking around the streets to see who's dumping out their garbage, trash, or green leaves so you can take it and put it in your garden.
So, Bill, what you're telling me is literally anything from the garden, clippings, leaves, stems, twigs, any of this, quote, organic matter can be used to make mulch. We don't have to do anything special. We don't have to turn it. We don't have to add anything to it, and we can use it as mulch.
You're correct. This is the urban strategy that the single most important thing that people can do is start saying, no, I'm not going to give up my organic material. A lady from Germany came to talk to me at a composting workshop and said, we would never think of giving up our leaves and grass to the trash. Behind me here is a landfill that's made a mountain out of people throwing away their material. Any material that you have available, if you have land to put it on, is a good start.
And even if I'm not, quote, an organic gardener, you know, if I'm fertilizing my lawn or doing things like that, I can use those clippings for mulch, right?
It's one of those panaceas and a good vitamin pill, if you will, for the soil, even if you're using chemicals. But if you want to start weaning yourself from that, this will provide the elixir for the soil to allow the microorganisms to build up. This is habitat and food for a whole food chain that'll keep your plants healthy, and you won't need chemical fertilizers.
People keep looking for some sort of secret, you know, that there's some sort of secret recipe to all of this, and that's not really true, right?
Well, the secret is to go out into a forest and take off your shoes and scrape into the soil and see the loam and the richness and the good smells that are created by nothing other than leaves falling, branches falling on the ground. And what we need to do is mimic natural systems and cycles. This is embodied solar energy. It comes from the sun. Plants create it with chlorophyll. We then now want to use it as a carbon-based storage system. If you add nitrogen to this, then we compost and get hotter material. But this is the first-line urban strategy for all of us to take on, is mulching and then composting and then throwing seeds around and almost creating the Garden of Eden around us.
Well, Bill, what else can you show us about mulch?
Well, let's walk around and look at the edible landscaping that we've created here on mulch. I mean, what you see here, and let's go up, let's walk around.
Let's do that.
Look. John, why don't you come on over here and look at this lavender plant. This is a Mediterranean drought-tolerant plant that we basically cover the soil and improve the carrying capacity. It's, in a sense, a sustainable design system. The new aesthetic is to put this cover of sort of a piece of cloth, a sweater or something, on the landscape that keeps the moisture in. It reduces the soil temperature. It adds the condominium high-rise association for microorganisms, their food and their habitat. Plus, it'll provide this plant with an ability to live with minimum irrigation.
Bill, explain what you mean by carrying capacity.
Well, the carrying capacity is the idea that this plant would be able to have nutrients and a habitat that it can grow in without external inputs. The idea that this plant is grown in our Mediterranean, Southern California climate because it adapts very well to a large drought season with minimum water and minimum nutrients. The nutrients in this soil, interestingly enough, are very poor. We got to start on this landfill site, and most of the topsoil was graded off.
This site was actually a landfill.
This site is a landfill. Right behind me here, this mountain is the landfill. 30 to 60% of the material that the urban waste stream of Los Angeles brings to us is this kind of material, cardboard, organic material that's now dumped.
Things that we could be using as mulch.
But what I want you to see is, most importantly, is that we have a Washington navel orange here, we have lavenders, we have plums, we have blackberries, we have chives.
So it's an edible landscape too.
It's an edible landscape, so it's giving me aesthetics like the yarrow here, that's an insect control right next to the citrus. So I have ornamentally edible landscapes that are linked to mulching systems that are linked to, as you said, regenerative treasure chests. The sustainable or carrying capacity of the land is improved. Each year, that I put this material on and just add water.
You know, I hear the word sustainable a lot. What does it mean to you?
Well, sustainability is not robbing from our children. It's the ability to design a system that gives our children a voting for their future and their resources. We need to be more cunning about the pollution systems we're creating. In nature, there isn't any pollution. So in nature, as I said earlier, this is the forest, basically embodied energy, the treasure chest of the next generation. And so in our sustainable system, we are designing something that I can leave so that your children and my children will have a more fertile environment to live by. In a sense, the Garden of Eden created over time.
Now, how thick is the mulch bed here?
The mulch bed should be anywhere from 2 inches to 4 to 6 inches, and then recreated every 3 to 6 months. If we come in and top dress this as a sheet mulching system, we can break this down much quicker, and we can also have the system be more power packed by adding, as you know, different things that some rock fertilizers, some varieties of manures, some
depending on what it is
depending on what we want to do, because each of these trees need, we're in a sense, we're talking about being good cooks on the soil. We're adding our nitrogen and our carbon together, and then we're adding the spices on the landscape. And you'll see in the garden areas, I took blue clay and now turned it into something we can grow corn on in less than 6 months. This whole landscape that you're seeing here is only 2 years old. And so we are now getting the synergy of all of our activities blossoming.
How long does it take before we really see the results of mulch?
What's really interesting is that when you put mulch on the ground, like you said, how much do you put on? There's really not a basic answer, because I put it on and 2 to 3 months from now, people are going to go, where's the mulch? You know, that's a good question. Where'd the mulch go? The mulch went into the mouths of all the fungus, bacteria, and algae. That's why I talk about them, the FBI. They're coming and investigating and eating and munching and then creating the soil horizon, because all these trees you see around here, 90% of the roots are in the first 2 feet of soil. 90% of the trees in the world are within that horizon where water and air live. And so what we're now creating is the house for the root systems, for the microbes to work with the roots.
So what do you say to people who look at a landscape like this and say, well, that's not really very aesthetic, you know, that they would actually want to rake these leaves right off the ground?
In fact, most maintenance services do the clean and green system. They basically
mow, blow, and go.
Mow, blow, and glow system. And I say, do you want to create the IRA of the future, the Invest in Renewable America or Rural America? This is the start. Instead of putting your money in bank accounts or paying it out in water bills, maintenance bills, we need to create urban forests that design fertility as a basic prerequisite to the beginning of our new life. And we're starting it by doing this, because water conservation laws in California, as you know, by being really sensitive to growing native plants that adapt better. Landfill mandates that say we're going to reduce by AB 939 60% of our waste in the landfill makes this a prime target to doing. We're socially correct, we're politically correct, but most importantly, which I think people are going to imagine, is we're economically sensible, that they will pay less for their landscapes over time if they change their ethic.
You know, Bill, when you feel this soil down here, it actually even feels cooler than, say, this surface here, the concrete right here. Completely different.
That's the complete beauty of this whole system, is that we create an environment that synergistically provides for plants. And in the consequence of that, we reduce these mountains for a landfill just by the sensibility of the protection that we give the soil. The soil temperature is reduced.
When you talk about the temperature, what is the actual direct benefit to the soil when we reduce the temperature?
When we reduce the temperature, it doesn't dry out, so that basically you have soil environments that are more conducive to microorganisms that allow